He was the biggest loser at the Adventurers Guild, but one day after getting devoured by a massive dragon on one of his adventures, he gets reincarnated as an undead monster with the ability to level up and evolve. The story begins with our hero, Rent, who is a low-ranked bronze adventurer in backwater towns so irrelevant that even the mapmakers decided it wasn't worth including. After getting his things, he hurries off to the guild, hoping to snag a decent job before they're all taken. A group of fellow adventurers walks in and asks if he's heading to the dungeon again. Rent tells them that will be the plan if he fails to land a job today as well. After they head out, he checks the request board, but as always, nothing fits his level, meaning it's back to the labyrinth for him. In a world where most adventurers team up in parties, Rent is still running solo. No partner and no wifey, probably because he's just too weak to hold on to one. Even after grinding for 10 full years in the adventurer's life, he still hasn't climbed past the Bronze League, which sadly sits just one notch above the absolute bottom. After stepping out of the guild, he grabs a cheap bun to munch on during his break inside the dungeon, and without the slightest idea of what's lying in wait, he heads straight into the labyrinth. The dungeon he chooses, known as the Deserted Moon's Reflection, is said to be fully explored already. Yet somehow he stumbles upon a hidden passage that doesn't even show up on the map. Believing luck's finally smiling on him, he rushes in without a second thought. He later thinks that technically he could have reported the discovery to the guild and raked in a fat reward just by handing over the intel. But in classic human fashion, greed took over the wheel, and he kept going deeper, driven by the hope of scoring some rare and valuable treasure. But unfortunately for him, that path led him to an unexplored chamber, ruled by a full-blown legendary dragon ripped straight out of the ancient myths. As soon as he lays eyes on the massive beast, Rent feels his whole body lock up, and true to his new status, he dies right then and there in one bite. Now this would have been the end of the story for any normal person, but due to his thick plot armor, instead of staying dead, he ends up getting reincarnated in the same world as an undead skeleton. When he finally wakes up, Rent drags his bones to a nearby water source to find out that from being a low-ranked adventurer, he has not turned into one of the weakest monsters. He struggles to believe he's still alive after getting eaten by such a terrifying beast, but wonders if he can even call his state as being alive. He slowly begins to understand that he's now some creepy, immortal undead, and this realization throws him into worry since the moment a priest lays eyes on him, he could easily get erased by a blast of holy purification magic. Just existing in this form is already breaking nature's laws, so he immediately ditches the idea of heading back to the guild, as someone like him would probably get declared an abomination and slain on the spot. What messes with his head the most is how he's basically dead, but still not dead. Once he's done flipping out over it, he grabs his blade and forces himself up. Thankfully, the dragon that did this to him is nowhere in sight, so Ren escapes this cursed part of the dungeon. He begins thinking about how mysterious dungeons really are, since no researcher has ever been able to properly explain where they come from. He also wonders if solo adventurers have ever managed to clear out a dungeon alone, and right when that thought hits him, the idea of talking to someone makes him pause, because of course he no longer has vocal cords or even a mouth to speak from. At that moment, a shaky-looking skeleton enemy appears in front of him, and Rent rushes in with his blade, but just as he raises it in an attempt to be cautious, he trips and crashes right on his back bumper. The skeleton enemy sees its chance and charges in, but ends up face-planting as well, with its leg bones flying off in different directions. The poor thing tries to piece itself back together, but before it can, Rent quickly comes up with an idea and decides to try using his spirit energy. Luckily it works, and he crushes the enemy bones. As the defeated skeleton's bones collapse and begin glowing, Rent starts to panic, thinking it's about to come back to life again, but instead, a wave of spiritual energy flows into him, healing him completely on the spot. This brings to mind something his scholar friend Lorraine once shared with him, a strange bit of knowledge about a supernatural phenomenon found in some of the rarest and most bizarre monsters known as existential evolution, where instead of staying a pile of bones forever, a skeleton could actually transform into something like a ghoul. This sparks a bit of motivation in our hero as he now sets his sights on evolving into one of those creatures himself, thinking that if he can manage to grow some flesh, then maybe by throwing on a few clothes, he could actually blend in well enough to sneak back into town. He keeps taking down skeletons one after another, and each time gets healed up by the same mysterious light he saw earlier. Later, he goes up against a slime monster, and while these things are usually considered weak, for someone in his current bony state, it turns out to be a pretty tough challenge. The slime spits out its acidic liquid right at him, but Rhett manages to dodge just in time before going all out and taking the creature down. After defeating it, he grabs its magic crystal and also starts collecting its body fluid, since once a slime dies, its acid becomes harmless and the liquid can be safely touched, often used in making cosmetics. Meanwhile, back at the guild, a guy walks up to the counter lady and tells her about a rookie girl who recently joined. The receptionist replies that she had actually planned to pair the girl up with Rent, but then shares her concern over how he still hasn't come back, adding that the whole thing is starting to feel strangely unusual. Back in the dungeon, our guy has paused to catch his breath. Holding a bun in his hand, he starts wondering how a skeleton is even supposed to eat something like that, and the more he thinks about it, the more he realizes that he doesn't feel hungry or sleepy at all. But what really bothers him is how he still hasn't undergone any sort of ghoul evolution yet. He tries casting his spiritual magic and fire magic, and both seem to work just fine. But what really catches him off guard is that he can even use his divinity despite being undead. He quickly casts it on the bread to purify it, keeping it from rotting for the next 3 days in the hope that maybe by then he might have a body capable of actually eating it. Rent can't stand being weak since he has been training for over 2 decades without seeing any real growth. What's odd though is how he's one of the rare few who can use all 3 forms of power, including magic, divinity, and spiritual energy, though unfortunately none of them is particularly strong. Rent gathers some courage and quickly pushes himself up with a strong desire burning inside him to someday rise all the way to the legendary mithril class adventurer rank. He charges forward and takes on another wave of skeletons and slimes, and this time he clearly feels himself growing stronger with each swing. The familiar light appears once again, but unlike before, it brings along a surge of intense pain that rips through him right before he finally starts growing flesh and experiences the long-awaited evolution he had been hoping for. Although he still looks like a disturbing mess, he can't help but feel a bit proud after seeing the progress he has made. His thoughts drift to vampires who appear almost human, and he begins wondering if he might be able to become one of them someday. He tries speaking but lets out a monstrous roar instead. Refusing to give up, he keeps on trying and throws out a good morning. And while the words come out barely understandable, it becomes clear that with enough practice, he might just be able to hold a proper conversation. After evolving into a ghoul, our boy now finds himself going up against goblins. He feels a spark of joy over his recent evolution and notices with surprise that all of his powers have become much stronger than before, especially now that he can even channel his spirit energy through his sword, which makes him wonder if he has already become stronger than he ever was back when he was just a fragile human. Just then, the newbie adventurer shows up in the dungeon right next to our boy and engages with a skeleton, barely managing to bring it down. Rent considers going up to talk to her, but quickly stops himself, realizing a ghoul might not be the kind of creature she would calmly want to have a conversation with. As she picks up the crystal, he quietly watches from a distance, figuring that she must be someone new around town. He keeps tailing her while reflecting on how, for some reason, the guild still seems to like him and has yet to force him into retirement even though he is clearly weak. Rent keeps following the girl as she walks deeper in, but ends up cornered against a wall by a dumb skeleton, and things take a turn for the worse when the monster grabs onto her blade. Before it can pull its next move, Rent rushes in and takes out the skeleton, leaving the girl totally confused about why a ghoul would suddenly jump in to help her. Rent tries to convince her that he means no harm, and when she raises her blade in defense, he throws away his own sword, hoping to earn her trust. He tells her that he is an adventurer too, and that just a few days ago she would have seen him as a regular human. He introduces himself while trying to explain that something strange happened and he woke up as an undead. The girl, who seems well-mannered, thanks him for saving her, and Rent politely asks if she can help him sneak into town by lending him a robe or anything to hide his ugly appearance. He even offers her a bit of money in return and takes a step back to not spook her. She introduces herself as Reina and promises to repay her debt by helping him. She heads off, asking him to wait there as she will return soon with something to help him cover up. Rent can only hope that she does not go around telling everyone that she met a talking ghoul asking for clothes to sneak into a town, since that could end really badly for him. As the sun begins to set, Reina rushes up to the receptionist, asking for the supplies she needs. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon, Rent finally starts to feel that he has become far stronger than he ever was as a human. His combat instincts have leveled up immensely, and he now takes down slime monsters with ease. Reina arrives, calling out his name and giving our guy a bit of hope. She hands over the clothes he asked for and even brings him the leftover change. As Rent walks toward the items, she instinctively tenses up just in case the ghoul suddenly turns aggressive. Seeing him look down, she quickly apologizes, explaining that she was just startled, and promises she will try to get used to him if he is willing to give her a little more time. Rent checks the robe and is clearly impressed, especially because the kind girl has even brought in gloves and shoes so he can completely hide his appearance. He starts feeling like he could cry, even though his undead body no longer allows that. He quickly puts on the clothes, but as soon as Reina pulls out a mirror, he gets anxious about how his face still looks. Thankfully, the girl has thought of that too and hands him a mask. Rent lifts it to his face, but just as it gets close, the mask suddenly latches onto him on its own. Reina lights up because he now looks like a cool shaman, but sadly the mask turns out to be cursed and gets stuck onto his face. She apologizes and explains that she got it for a really cheap price, and although it looked shady, she had touched it herself and nothing weird happened. Rent starts wondering why his luck always sucks, but then he gets an idea and tries to use his divinity magic. Just when it seems to be working, he runs out of energy and fails to break the curse. Reina apologizes again for bringing him some shady face gear, but Rent tries to look on the bright side and says it might actually help him hide his identity more effectively. He reaches out his arm toward her but pulls it back slightly, only for her to grab hold of it and tell him that she is not afraid of him anymore. Rent senses her to be a bit uncomfortable and tells her that he appreciates it and is more than willing to give her all the time she needs. Reina takes him along to the village, and while sitting in a cart, she opens up about her story and how she made the long journey from the capital just because there are 2 good dungeons in this area for training. She also shares her dream of seeing the entire world and becoming really strong one day. At Rent's request, Reina also helps him get past the town gates. As they approach the entrance, the guards stop them and ask for identification. Both of them present their adventurer IDs, which seems to satisfy the guards at first, But just as they're about to be let through, one of the guards grows suspicious of Rent's getup. They demand he show his face. Before Rent can say a single word, Rana steps up and snaps at them, saying the poor guy suffered a horrible facial injury and only wears the mask to cover his scars. She adds that, unfortunately, the mask turned out to be cursed and now he can't even take it off. The guards check the mask themselves and apologize for their rude behavior. Once they're inside the town, Rent quietly decides it's better to put some space between them for her sake. Without saying a word, he slips away, disappearing from her as she continues to look for him. Rent makes his way to Lorraine's house and knocks on the door, but when no one comes to answer it, he ends up breaking in and walks straight in to find her fast asleep. He goes on to explain everything that's happened to him. And surprisingly enough, the lady with the sketchy past doesn't seem the least bit freaked out by any of it. After hearing everything, she says she has never come across a case like his in her entire life and asks whether the dragon still stays there. He replies that it might not remain there anymore, which only leaves her more confused. But she feels bad after seeing how rough he looks and decides to let it go for now. Rent figures nobody other than Lorraine would stay calm after hearing all that, though he knows she sees him more as a lab rat than a friend. After giving it some thought, she asks whether he truly is the Rent Feyena she once knew, which instantly throws him into a full-blown midlife crisis. He says he's not really sure anymore, which actually makes her smile since that sounds exactly like something Rent would say. With that, she decides to let him off the hook and wants to know what his plan is now, so he repeats his dream of becoming a mithril adventurer in his usual edgy voice, and Lorraine says she could take on some jobs for him and even lets him stay at her place for the time being. Of course, she doesn't do it for free and asks for some of his skin and meat each day to help with her research. The next day, she returns with stacks of cash from his loot and says she'll pay him directly because his high-quality materials make top-notch beauty products, so Rent happily takes the dub and heads to the blacksmith. Walking through town with his fat stacks puts him in a good mood until people start giving weird looks, so he rushes to his destination. Inside, the dumpling-haired lady at the counter greets him despite his strange appearance, so he gives her his sword, which looks clearly damaged beyond repair even though he took great care of it. She guesses it got ruined by his use of magic or spirit energy, but Rent's aura shoots up as he tells her he uses both and also divinity just because he can. The lady gasps and says he's only the second customer she's met who possesses all three, but he makes her promise to keep his power hidden and confidentiality as their top rule. He drops the bag on her table and tells her to cook up something really strong, so she tells him blacksmith Cloak's work is no joke and he'll call many times to make sure it's perfectly crafted just for him. Hearing that, he tells her to drop it off at the scholar Lorraine's place. Meanwhile, Lorraine flips through the books and finds that no adventurer has ever been reborn while keeping their personality, and even if it sounds too weird to believe, he still feels like the same Rent she loves. She thinks back to when some guy told her to take him to the forest as a bodyguard and pack mule, saying there's no need to pay him since he's just a sad iron rank rookie. Out in the forest, she has no clue which herbs she's supposed to pick and remembers how her life felt dull and pointless before meeting him because everything came easy but nothing hit right. So she went out to touch grass just purely out of boredom. She finally spots the right herb and carefully digs it out before calling for her bag boy to carry it, only to find out he's already dug up a clean stack of 64 with scary precision in the time it took her to get one. After that, he asks her if it's her first time touching grass and gets her all embarrassed when he admits that everyone sent him with her because they are worried about her. He starts talking about how much he studied plants and monsters to chase his dream and completely rizzes her to the core. They then introduce themselves and Lorraine asks him to teach her everything he knows about being an adventurer, and that's how it all kicks off. Lorraine figures it would be amazing if she could see him hit his dream rank with her around, but she still feels content even if things have shifted a little. Back at the blacksmith, the albino hair hippie tells him to look well after the weapon and offers a handshake. Rent pauses for a second but goes with it, and after checking out his new sword, he heads out fast, which makes the lady feel down since she knows he's hiding the pain from his curse. Later at Lorraine's place, she thanks him for the tasty food and finds out he doesn't feel hungry anymore, then brings up what she read about his evolution and asks what he wants to become. He says he just wants to get as close to humans as possible, which means he's going to be grinding in the dungeon for a long time. The next day, a cowboy gets wrecked by a giant slime until it turns to goo in a flash thanks to Rent. The man tries to thank him for saving his life, but Bro keeps walking since he thinks the guy's an Indian tech support scammer pretending to be weak. But the man stops him and asks for work since he's broke and weaker than his own mom. Once he finds out Rent's a vet, he admits he's actually a chef drowning in debt and stuck in the dungeon solo because no party wants a crusty old dude like him. Rent still keeps moving until something clicks, and he tells the guy to come with him. After some time, they come across the secret passage, and what's inside stuns the chef. As they explore the area, Rent feels let down since he finds no magic items, but the man calls him over to see another hidden route and starts getting greedy. Even so, Rent tells him he can take the reward for discovering it, but should wait behind until they reach an empty room. Rent warns the guy to hold up since he sees a trap, but the man walks forward without a clue. Once our hero realizes normal people can't spot it, he watches the cowboy step on it and vanish. He knows teleport traps usually throw adventurers into lower floors with nasty monsters or loaded traps, but leaving someone like that would make him no better than a monster. So he jumps in and ends up in a Dark Souls boss room where he finds the chef down after getting wrecked by a huge skeleton that won't let him leave unless he takes it out. He powers up and lands a hard spirit energy hit which does 0 damage, then tries magic but doesn't leave a scratch. Realizing there's no escape unless he wins, Rent sticks to his dream, and even if the sword can't manage it, he charges with divinity since it works best on undead and lands a massive blow on the bunny freak that knocks it down hard, then finishes it off with every ounce of strength in one brutal strike. After that, he patches up the old man who notices the skeleton lies completely shattered, and Rent surprises him by dropping a massive magic crystal, offering it to clear the man's debt. Naturally, there's a catch, although the chef wonders how he could ever help such a powerful adventurer like Rent. Rent reveals his condition and explains that he just needs someone to pick up supplies for him at shops and the guild, and also wants to eat and drink there for free whenever he shows up, which moves the man so much that tears start falling. Once he points out the invisible magic circle, Rent decides to head back too, even though part of him still feels tempted to explore more. Back in town, the old man shows off his tavern when his cute wife pops out and wraps him in a choking tight hug. She feels embarrassed for acting so affectionate in front of a stranger, and the old man pulls out the huge magic stone his savior gave him, which makes her think he's gonna donate his second kidney to a fraud again. He tells her to relax and explains it's all in return for free food, and the two share a wholesome hug that melts the heart. After old man Loris and his wife give their names, Rent decides to slip out quickly without hanging around any longer. On his way back, he moves through the dark alleys while troubling thoughts flood his mind. Outside Lorraine's house, his vision starts to glitch like an old TV screen, and he steps inside to find her sitting there looking like a snack. She throws questions at him, but he keeps staring, which makes her worried about his health. He suddenly hugs her, which makes her a little too happy as he holds her tighter and softly says her name, but the moment shifts fast when he digs in like a Mexican devours tacos and then quickly pulls away. She keeps calling his name until he finally snaps out of it, and right after that, she blasts him and puts him to sleep while saying he can enjoy her like a snack anytime if he just asks nicely. Later, he wakes up with a bad headache and she starts asking questions, but Brent says he has no clue what went down. He apologizes even after she tells him not to worry, but he still admits his desire got too strong because she's got more taste than McDonald's. Hearing that, Lorraine says she already suspected this might happen since ghouls hunger for flesh, and says they both need some rest. Still, he asks her to show him her wound and then uses his divinity to heal it until it fades completely. Just then, she catches a glimpse of his ripped body and realizes he's evolved so much that he nearly looks human, and even his mask has changed as it can now shift shape at will. Though he still can't take it off all the way. After she tries pulling it off, he starts wondering if he looks more human because of his desire, and remembers the change didn't happen right after he beat the big bad skeleton. So she suggests the trigger might have been gobbling her meat, which would make him a subbreed of vampires called ghasts. Even though it's just a theory, a game theory, she says she might have an idea how his evolution really works. Lorraine explains that unlike regular monsters, he has the ability to use his will to choose what kind of monster he becomes, so one day he might reach vampire status. But to do that, he needs to figure out what the condition is besides slaying strong monsters. After the talk, she tells him to strip and starts gushing with excitement as she turns into a full-on mad scientist, listing all the things she wants to test on him. But once she sees his ugly, tired face, she realizes he needs rest and decides to let him off the hook. The next day, Rent practices some sword swings outside and feels glad his lust has faded, even though his sword seems to say otherwise. So he drops by the emo blacksmith and explains it broke when he used divinity. The sulky smith tells him to stop lying since there aren't any strong undead in the labyrinth, but Rent says there actually was a giant skeleton, which Cloak clearly doubts until Rent mentions a hidden passage, and that reminds him who he's talking to. So Rent asks for a new sword fast so he can head back in, and with that, Cloak rents him one for old time's sake, which tells Rent he can never fool the sassy smith. Afterwards, Rent stops by Lorraine's place and finds her busy messing around with some alchemy, working on a poison strong enough to knock out even a red grizzly. The twisted grin she wears while doing it makes our guy seriously start to question whether agreeing to let her run experiments on him was ever a smart move in the first place. Our guy keeps his word and drinks the poison, immediately telling Lorraine how awful it tastes. She finds it hard to believe that something lethal enough to kill anyone who ever tried it barely registers as unpleasant to a ghoul's taste buds. Hearing this, she even starts feeling a little jealous when Rent casually mentions that he doesn't get tired anymore and doesn't even need to sleep. She asks if he still feels hunger, and Rent admits that while he doesn't crave normal food, he does have a faint desire for human blood and flesh. Without hesitation, Lorraine hands him a bottle filled with human blood just in case he gets too hungry and loses control. Rent only takes a single drop and stores the rest for later. He then brings up the idea of heading to the guild to accept some new requests, but Lorraine quickly points out that walking and looking like this might stir up more chaos than work. Rent tries to argue, saying that he's just a low-ranked adventurer and nobody would care, but the lady cuts him off and calls him out for being clueless, explaining that the guild actually likes him a lot and was even thinking about recruiting him officially. That little bombshell catches him off guard, but once he decides he wants to get back into the swing of things, Lorraine thinks for a moment and comes up with a clever plan, arguing that he could just register under a new name and identity, since no one would ever suspect it. Ren agrees and heads over to the guild, where he spots the receptionist Sheila and walks straight up to her for registration. She prepares the paperwork and hands him a form to fill out. The last time he did this, he only scribbled down his name and age, but this time around he knows exactly how to list his skills and what to write to make it count. The only thing that remains unchanged is his dream of becoming a mithril-class adventurer one day. He scribbles a name similar to his old one and hands the form over to Sheila. The moment she reads it, her expression drops, showing just how deeply the people at the guild miss our guy. Rent gently asks if the one she is missing is named Rentfina and uses that as an excuse to mention that he is supposedly a relative of Lorraine, currently staying in her place just to avoid giving people the wrong idea about her. The receptionist soon returns holding his adventurer's badge and informs him that he has been registered as an iron-class adventurer, encouraging him to do his best. She even tells his already dead ghoul to take care and not die as he walks out of the guild. From there, he heads straight to the dungeon where faint human screams echo through the corridors as people struggle against some goblins. He makes his way toward the noise and spots two kids fighting in sync, holding their own against a goblin and a slime. For a moment, he considers stepping in to help out like he used to in the good old days, but then decides to walk away, realizing that his appearance might terrify them instead. Moving silently, he slips deeper into the dungeon and enters its hidden section, thinking he could map it out and present it to the guild, which would be a major accomplishment. As he explores, he steps into a strange portal and suddenly finds himself inside a flat. There he stumbles upon an old, skeletonized human corpse with fresh flowers resting beside it, a detail that instantly tells him someone might actually be living within this labyrinth. Just as he reaches out to touch the flowers, a woman suddenly appears and demands to know what he is doing in a place like this. Ren explains that he ended up here by mistake, but the woman accuses him of sneaking in to steal her belongings. Without warning, she launches a blast of purple flames at him, slamming him against the wall and reducing his clothes to ashes, exposing the ghoul underneath. The moment she sees what he really is, she halts her attack and apologizes for the sudden strike. To make up for it, she even offers him her cloak in exchange for his now useless, burnt clothes. She hands him a scroll and sends him back up to the surface. Our guy brings it straight to Lorraine, and the two of them find out it might actually be a national treasure, one that can display maps of all the labyrinths its owner has explored and even shows the people moving through them with their names. Rent asks her to check whether it's cursed since he's already dealing with enough of those, but turns out he's already equipped it without even realizing, and there's no hint of any curse. Lorraine then asks if he knows the woman who attacked him, but Rent says the only thing he's sure of is that she's insanely strong and easily fits into the gold-class adventurer tier. Lorraine thinks it's strange that someone like her is living deep inside a dungeon and wonders if she just wants to be left alone. Rent heads back to the dungeon to check on her again, and the moment he steps in, hope rushes through him as he feels like reaching mithril class might not be that far off anymore. He starts searching for the woman but can't find a trace of the entrance that led to her, which makes him think she really does want to be left alone. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Sheila and the same adventurer from earlier are both stressing about Rent being missing again, hoping he shows up soon. Sheila's always been especially worried about him, not just because he helped everyone find their path as adventurers, but also because he's the reason she's even working at the guild in the first place. Just then, Rent Vivi walks in and completely startles her, taking on a request to deal with 3 orcs after reassuring her he's got it under control. Back at Lorraine's place, she points out how it's a huge issue that he needs to level up for a promotion, but can't just show up again as Rentfena when she suddenly comes up with the idea that he could use his second Smurf account, though he thinks that probably breaks some rule. Still, she reminds him that starting from the bottom is the only way to avoid the guild being on his case and ends up talking him into it. At the guild, he tells the receptionist he handled 3 orcs alone and drops the magic bag packed with proof, leaving her speechless. She notices how perfectly organized everything looks and praises his effort before walking off to the back without another word. While the room watches with envy, she finally walks back holding a letter from the guild master who says this guy might actually have the skill to reach bronze rank. Later that night, he tells Lorraine the news and she looks pretty impressed with how fast he climbed, but he admits it feels like cheating to rely on his monster body. She tells him to stop overthinking and asks what name he used, then almost chokes when he says he took her family name. He explains that if anyone notices him showing up every day, they'd assume something's sus. But she just tells him she's a broke mess who ditched the capital and now lives like a washed-up scholar with no reputation left anyway. The next day, Rent Vivi walks into the guild like the place belongs to him, and the guild lady looks shocked that he shows up without even looking at the study guide. He says the next test happens in 6 months and ain't nobody got time for that. Right after that, a man steps up to brief everyone and says the promotion exam starts with a written test, and only those who pass can take the practical. With the 2 newbies, Ren heads into the classroom and notices the purple-haired girl from before and figures her partner probably skips it since the dude can't read and must be taking it verbally. After the test, most people stumble out like they just wrote answers for rocket science, but the guild lady comes up and says Rent crushes it. She tells him he's paired with the rookie Dew for the next part, and the redhead tries to act tough, without any actual aura, while Laura keeps it polite and sweet. Rent gives his name, and right after that, the examiner says all they have to do is reach a marked location on the map to pass the practical. Everyone feels like that sounds too simple. Then the guy says the first group to arrive gets a bonus, so the whole crowd thinks it is a race. Outside the labyrinth, most teams rush in and Rise tries to brag about how experienced he is, but Laura shuts that down fast by saying they barely made it through the first floor, and as he starts to bolt ahead, Rent stops him. He says the guild's map looks older than his retired grandpa and they should get a fresh one, then walks over to a shady vendor who tries to charge 2 silver, but Rent tells him to cut the cap and pays 5 bronze instead. The newbie pair can't believe how different the new map looks, and the snake-eyed seller tells them to follow Daddy Rent if they actually plan on making it to the finish. Inside the dungeon, they face a skeleton squad, so Rent tells the kids to stay alert and finds himself impressed by how well they move as a team at their age, though Rise figures out in the end that the fight turns out harder than it looks. Laura says the number feels too high, so Rent finds the incense that draws them in and says the real danger still lies ahead since thugs wait to ambush them further in. As they try to take in the fact that their next fight involves actual humans, he slips around a corner and crosses blades with a bald swordsman. After clashing swords, he leaves Baldy to Rise and steps over to teach the archer a lesson before cutting through the mage's fireball like it's tissue and knocking him out cold. Baldy then manages to overpower Rise, but Laura saves the day by flashing him and knocks him out with a solid hit using a bunch of potatoes shaped like his shiny head. After tying up the thug squad, Rent says this proves why adventurers can afford to drop their guard, and Rise finally shows him the respect he earns. Meanwhile, in the guildmaster's office, the old man brings up the new guy the receptionist watches over and says shady rumors are spreading as it is way too sketchy for a random dude with powerful skills to just roll into town and start crushing quests. He tells her to keep him under constant watch just in case. While back in the dungeon, the group reaches a boss room and Rent asks Rise if he's ever taken one on before. The discount down from DMC5 says he's still an iron level rookie, so Rent says there's nothing wrong with walking away from a fight that's too much. A gang of NPCs shows up with trash attitudes and starts mouthing off while throwing creepy comments at Laura, which pushes Rise close to snapping. But Rent instantly points his blade at the leader's neck and tells him to save the circus act. He says they're free to go in first, which throws the redhead off, but a few minutes later, the gang rushes back out screaming after getting clapped. Rent reminds Rise that smart adventurers know when to step back, but the boy says he wants to level up for real and won't get aura points by staying home like a broke nobody. That drive makes Rent proud of his team, and from there, the trio steps into the boss room together. Inside the boss room, the trio comes face to face with a massive grand slime boss that looks way too oversized to be natural. Rise and Laura get all hyped for the battle, while Rent kind of wishes the earlier party had already taken care of it since there's no actual test requirement to beat the thing. Rise charges in with all the excitement of a kid on sugar, Laura backs him up with magic from behind, and Rent takes on the role of their trusty coach like he's been rented out to guide them through this mess. Before stepping into the room, Rent had gone over their strategy where Laura plays the ace card since only magic can hurt the thing, and the overly eager Rise plays bait to keep it distracted. When things start looking rough for the kid, Rent jumps in without hesitation and saves him before he gets splattered. They manage to buy Laura just enough time to finish her chant, and she hurls a huge fire spell that melts the grand slime into a bubbling puddle. Right before it regenerates, Rise smashes the core and finishes the fight once and for all. After that, Rent asks them to help scoop up some of the leftover slime fluid since even one bottle could go for at least a silver coin. As they're collecting it, another group suddenly shows up from behind and bolts past them like it's some kind of race. Rise starts getting a little panicky watching them take the lead, but Laura stays calm and seems to be on the same wavelength as Rent. They all just stand and watch as the rushing group walks straight into a trap and gets knocked out by a burst of sleeping gas. Laura turns to Rise and casually explains the whole thing was never meant to be a race to begin with, which clearly catches him off guard. Before long, the three make it to the final spot with zero trouble. The man waiting there congratulates them for being the first to arrive, but Laura, picking up Rent's critical habits, immediately asks him to prove his ID or something. The guild guy at the checkpoint hands them a token they can show back at the guild to get promoted to bronze tier, and on top of that, the trio also receives a stack of potions as a bonus reward meant for the first 3 teams to reach the destination. Before they head back, Rent decides to take them on a quick detour to the dungeon's 2nd floor, which turns out to be this stunning forest where somehow sunlight manages to shine through. Rise asks if they could explore a bit since it looks like a vacation spot, but Rent reminds him they're only here for sightseeing, and that the exam doesn't count as complete until they're officially back at the guild. Once they return, the trio heads straight to the counter and asks about their promotion. Right then, a guild guy shows up and tells Sheila they're good to go since he had been secretly watching over them the whole time, and with that, Rent finally circles back to the same rank he held before dying, or well, not exactly dying. After the promotion, the duo parts ways with their Gramps, promising to team up with him again someday. As they walk away, Sheila calls Rent out and asks him for the truth, clearly having pieced a few things together. Rent gives her a quiet apology and says he'll be leaving for good. But before he can take another step, the receptionist grabs his cloak and stops him, wanting answers about what really happened on the day he disappeared. Rent tries slipping away from the scene but ends up getting roped in by Sheila once he realizes just how worried she's been about him. She pulls him over to a table to talk things through, and that's when our guy tells her he's got a problem he can't let the guild or anyone else find out about. Sheila smiles and says she hasn't breathed a word about him to the guild since she wanted to hear the truth straight from him. though the man who was tailing him during the test had already picked up on her suspicions. Luckily, he turns out to be her brother and happens to be great at keeping things quiet, wanting to understand everything that's happened to him. Sheila shows up fully prepared and even goes so far as to present a magical contract, one that would make her leave the guild and force her into some slavery agreement in a different country, where that sort of thing is still legal, all just to prove she can be trusted. She tells him that she wants to help, and while Rent finds her a bit too intense, he ends up agreeing and signs the contract. But instead of telling the story, he asks her to witness it for herself and lifts a portion of his mask to reveal his rotten, ghoulish face. She flinches for a second, but then leans in and asks to hear more. Rent keeps it simple and explains that he kicked the bucket inside of the dungeon all thanks to a dragon and came back as an undead. When he notices her getting a little shaken, he asks if she still wants to help him. Just as he's about to walk off, Sheila grabs his hand and says she believes every word he just said, then gently holds on tighter, vowing to stick with him no matter what. Back at Lorraine's place, Sheila tags along with Rent, and the three of them settle down for a chat as Lorraine turns to Sheila and asks how much she really knows about Rent. Sheila says all she knows is that he's some kind of monster, but she's sure he wouldn't hurt anyone. Lorraine decides to raise the stakes and, clearly trying to scare Sheila off, warns her that if she's come all the way to a shady academic's home with a monster in tow, she better be ready to end up as part of their stew. What Lorraine's really doing is testing if Sheila is worthy enough to keep the secret that she's hosting a monster, and when she gets her answer, she apologizes for being rude and offers her dinner as a way to make up for it. At the dining table, Rent pulls out the vial of blood and licks a drop off, making Sheila realize that ghouls must be somehow connected to vampires. Sheila then lets them in on the real reason she came, explaining how a kidnapper is suspected to be on the loose because so many rookies have disappeared without a trace, no bodies or supplies found. This makes everyone suspicious of Rent since he fits the profile of a shady guy involved in some messy business. The next morning, the old guild leader talks with the receptionist about their missing Rent, arguing that he still wants to bring him back into the guild once he returns and then decides to retire. A few days later, Rent swings his new sword around during practice while Cloak watches after tuning it to handle both his spirit and magic power and tells him to test it out. Rent charges it with magic and slices through wood like butter, which leaves the blacksmith speechless. He follows up with spirit power that completely chars the target, and then tries divinity, which at first does nothing obvious, but Cloak spots tiny plants sprouting from the cut a moment later and wonders when Rent even got divinity, since it is a power that comes from the heavens. He starts going on about fixing a random shrine once, so the sassy smith ignores his yapping and says he's keeping the sprouts since they'll sell for good coin. Rent steps in and says he wants to see what happens when he mixes everything, so the smith grabs a huge chunk of wood and says mana spirit fusion is a crazy move that could blow him up like an overcooked grenade. Rent stays unfazed since he's built different, so the man gives him an ugly sacrificial sword that nobody cares about since it's cheap and trash anyway. Rent fills his blade with magic and pumps spirit power into his other hand and fuses them into a wild purple aura that makes his whole body tremble. One hit completely wrecks Cloak's big wood, but Rent still isn't satisfied and says he wants to try using them all at once. He surrounds himself with a blazing gold aura that hits harder than expected and shakes him to the core, so the blacksmith warns him not to strain too hard and make a mess in his yard. Rent's sword nearly falls apart from the force, but he slams the log on time, making it spin before turning into a perfectly round ball on the ground. Cloak explains divinity resets things back to how they started, so any blade he uses will always break. Rent remembers the elf lady from the dungeon and asks what he's supposed to do when the enemy is way too strong. Cloak suggests he can craft a stack of swords for him if he's got the coin, which our broke boy does not. On the way back, he sees an old man chewing out a random kid, so he shadow steps behind him and bribes him with a silver coin. The boy starts sweating like he's about to get all his organs jacked, but Rent calmly asks what the problem is. The kid says he needs help defeating the Lake Lord, which grabs his attention. On the way to his home, Rent recalls that the kid famously called Monkey Boy in his village mentioned the ritual where a girl is offered to the lake during their festival to honor the one who once gave up her life to save everyone. Ever since that last sacrifice, though, not only does the Lake Lord keep eating the girls, but now it hungers for more than ever, which is cutting down the village's supply of hot girls faster than the Amazon rainforest. The kid begs them to save his sister, who is next on the list, and Rent feels bad, so he agrees to check things out since the story feels a bit off. When they arrive, every door slams shut the moment people see Monkey Boy, so he rushes Rent straight to his place. His sister pops out, grabs him inside, and beats him up so loud that Rent hears every hit from outside. She then apologizes for her dumb brother and asks Rent to walk away from the mission before he ruins their sacred tradition. Rent says Monkey Boy hired him so only Monkey Boy can take it back, which the kid refuses to do. The girl gives up and tells him he can stay if he doesn't interfere in the ritual, and Rent gladly takes her up on it. The next day, he walks through a caravan and spots a sketchy dude handing snacks to kids to bribe them into bringing their parents next time because no one wants to buy from them. Right then, Rent shows up and scares the life out of the kids, so the trader tells him he picked a rough time to show up as tensions are high because of the Kraken. The weird merchant sparks Rent's curiosity, so he asks Riemptis about them and learns they come often and sell some useful stuff. As the sun goes down, the old ladies apologize to Riemptis' sister, but she smiles and says she's happy to be chosen. When they bring up how hard her brother tried to stop them, she gets emotional. Later on, Rent visits her and says he's there for her. Even though she tells him to stay out of it, he reminds her that her brother only fights so hard because they're all each other has left. Later that night, the elders give their apologies and send her off with a lamp, unaware that Rent and her brother wait up ahead for their secret mission. As the boats float out onto the pond, a thick fog rolls in and the lamp lights up just before a red disco light starts flashing at them. Out of nowhere, a giant tentacle monster rises from the water, so Monkey Boy's sister pleads for mercy. But Rent points out it's just a hologram and jumps onto the water using magic boots Lorraine crafted for him. He flashes right through the fake beast while knocking away fireballs that the men behind it launch at him. The creepy dwarf says Rent should have stayed away and orders his crew to open fire, but Rent rushes right at them and wipes out the crew. A moment later, the siblings show up and witness the truth for themselves. The next day, the crew is all tied up while Rent questions them about the missing girls. The ugly short stack confesses they are safe and unharmed, then gives up the location where he keeps them hidden. With that part settled, the siblings ask Rent to stick around a bit longer, but he tells them he has something urgent back home. Just as he turns to leave, the little sister sneaks in a kiss on his rusty cheek as thanks, and he takes it with a grin before jumping into the carriage. Back at Lorraine's place, he tells her about all that happened and the happy ending, so she gets up in his face and asks the lucky rascal how he stole yet another maiden's heart. Dense as obsidian, he says it was just her way of thanking him and nothing more. The next day, our guy heads to the guild as usual and spots a request posted on the board offering just a single bronze piece. Even though it sounds like free labor, he talks it over with Sheila and finds out that some kids in an orphanage need the dragon blood flower because it's the only cure for someone they care about. Rent, being his usual self, jumps at the request, reminding himself that adventuring isn't just about money, but about helping others too. Rent arrives at the place and finds it much more worn down than he expected. He tries knocking on the door but ends up breaking the knocker, so he uses a slime to fix it right away. A girl appears and tells him the headmistress isn't around and he should come back later since she thinks he might be a debt collector. She's startled by his appearance but lets him in once she realizes he's the adventurer. The girl introduces Rent to the kids at the orphanage, who rush toward him as soon as they learn who he is. She quickly tells them to keep their distance from the adventurer because they could be troublemakers, forgetting for a moment that Rent standing right behind her fits that description too. When she turns to apologize, Rent just smiles and tells her it's good they stay cautious. Rent tells the girl she can feel comfortable around him and forget all the formalities. She introduces herself as Elise, and they start talking about the request. Elise asks Rent to promise to keep it a secret before leading him to the orphanage's headmistress. The priestess apologizes and explains that the orphanage basement is filled with monsters, so she can't ask the children to clean it. She has no idea that Elise has changed the request. Elise quickly pulls Rent away, saying she'll explain everything herself. She tells him the priestess suffers from a disease called malaccumula, which happens when someone has divinity but not enough, and instead evil energy builds up inside the body. She says they brought in a healer who confirmed the diagnosis. About the cure, Elise mentions two options. One is the blood of a holy maiden, and the other is the dragon blood flower. She hasn't told the priestess about her own condition yet because if she knew, she would ask another priestess to replace her. Rent stands up and assures Elise he can make it happen. But before heading out for the flower, he decides to clear the basement first. Elise insists on following him because she wants to see him fight, so Rent gives her a small blade to defend herself if needed. Suddenly, little rat monsters with strange names appear, and when one tries to bite Rent, its contact with his blood makes it scream and fall back, its color changing. Rent realizes this is the effect of his vampiric trait and tells the rat to circle around, which it does, confirming his suspicion. After finishing the cleaning, Rent brings his new pet to Lorraine, hoping she can figure out what happened. Lorraine finds it strange since she never expected a ghoul to cause something like this. Still, she lets him keep the rat because one or two won't bother her much. When Lorraine asks our guy what he plans to name the creature, he quickly calls it Shadow, but Lorraine insists he should have thought it over and suggests the name Edel instead. Lorraine then asks our guy if he plans to go alone, and Ren explains that going solo means he won't have to worry about poison. She then warns him about a huge wyvern called Tarask that poses a real threat and suggests he might need a party to take it down. But Rent pulls out a bottle of holy water, saying he'll try to use it to keep the Tarask away and avoid any fight altogether. She hands him some food because she doesn't want him leaving early on an empty tummy and even adds a drop of blood to his bowl to spark his appetite. The next morning, Rent gets a carriage that drops him at the edge of the swamp, telling him to continue the rest of his journey on foot while promising to return by evening to pick him up. Surprisingly, the poisonous swamp air doesn't bother his pet Edel at all. As they step deeper, a group of hobgoblins ambushes them, attacking in waves, and Rent handles them all while Edel just watches from the sidelines like a casual spectator. Rent actually starts to appreciate his poison resistance and thinks that if it weren't for his appearance, he might be willing to stay like this forever, though he worries about whether a lady would ever marry someone with a body like his. When another monster appears, Rent ends up doing all the hard work again while his familiar lounges in the background acting like it couldn't care less. Meanwhile, Sheila visits Lorraine, who has breakfast ready for her. Sheila explains that the guild already knows what happened at Tatsu village and that the people there are grateful to the adventurer who helped them, but no matter how hard they tried, they refused to reveal his name. That's why she came here to talk to Rent about it in private, knowing that he wouldn't like talking about it at the guild. Back at the swamp, Rent is busy running away from the big bad wyvern chasing him. He ends up at a dead end and has no choice but to fight. He tries using his fusion skill, but it barely scratches the monster. Just when things look bleak, the freeloading rat jumps on the wyvern and uses Rent's powers to channel divinity, dealing a bit of damage. That gives Rent the clue he needs, and he charges his blade with divinity, finally bringing the beast down. He stores the monster in a storage bag and moves to collect the flower, finding a whole field covered in it. Just as he reaches for one, an elf appears, surprised to see anyone here at such a place. Rent gets ready to fight at any moment as the stranger walks closer and claims no normal human can survive in such a toxic swamp. The man says he carries a poison-resistant artifact and some holy water, and then tells him he's also there for the flowers, while Rent realizes he is the odd one out. After gathering a few flowers, the handsome guy explains he needs them to create medicine for his seriously ill mistress, so Rent wishes her good health. The guy then shares that he's quite lucky they ran into each other because he has been looking for someone to collect the flowers for his mistress regularly. Rent mentions he's a bronze-rank adventurer, which surprises the man, but he still recognizes Rent's strength and says he'd be happy if Rent agrees to help, before finally introducing himself as Isaac. At the guild, he drops his bag on the guild lady's desk and tells her to find him a butcher. So she quickly realizes he actually managed to take down one of the Tarask and shouts in surprise loud enough to make everyone stare. With that out of the way, they walk over to the nearest butcher named Dario, and Rent lets him know it is time to make some pork chops. Once everyone gears up like he's about to unleash a plague, Rent opens his magic bag and whips out his massive meat. Dario sees the flawless condition and says it could only look that good if Rent defeated the deadly beast in one blow. He tells him it should fetch a high price, and before Rent heads out, the guild lady smiles at his amazing progress and lets him know his strength is easily equal to his silver rank. The next morning, he heads to the orphanage and accidentally breaks the door handle again, but luckily he has some flex tape on hand and fixes it right away when a familiar face appears. Inside the old house, both she and the elderly man are amazed by how beautiful and well-kept it is, and the man points out that even experienced adventurers don't know jack about harvesting herbs, so he really is something special. After that, he gives his thanks to Rent for his help, so our hero drops a bag of flowers, free of charge, and tells them to make the best use of them. His selfless attitude leaves everyone stunned, and the little girl's eyes shine with hope. Later, she signs his contract and says she can't thank him enough since there's no way someone like her could ever be a real adventurer. She wishes she could help him even though she's built like a noodle, but he promises he'll come to her when he needs help. Just then, Adele pops up and says the critters in the basement are all taken care of, making her wish she also had a tamed monster like Rent. She gets excited when he tells her the guild offers classes and that he can also train her from time to time. She worries she can't afford it, but he reassures her that he knows a friend who's always loafing around and can spare some time to train her. They shake hands on it, and then he heads back to Lorraine's place, where she pretends like she isn't offended that Rent called her a loafer with no life, and then warns him to be more careful with his promises to young ladies. Rent fires back, he barely interacts with any, so Lorraine gives him a second chance to reconsider who he's forgetting. She suddenly gets up in a full-on mood swing and unleashes her deadliest spell, causing our guy to immediately burst out all the Shakespearean-level poetry he can muster on how she's the hottest young lady on Earth, which leaves her wondering where he learned to sweet-talk like that. She asks if he tries that with every girl he knows, but Rent makes an epic comeback and says he simply speaks what comes to mind when he sees her. The following day, he heads to the guild again, and the guild lady calls him over to speak in private, looking visibly panicked. She asks if he knows about the Latour house because they specifically requested him for a job, which reminds him of Isaac. He asks if the family is really that well known, to which she explains that they're not exactly nobles, but the secretive family holds significant influence over the city. Sheila admits she doesn't know much, but she warns him that every guild master is advised to be careful when dealing with House Latour, so he should not refuse their request. He assures her he's on board because even though he'd probably be hunted on the spot if they found out he's a monster, Isaac seemed pretty calm about the whole situation, and that's likely why he asked for him specifically. With that, Rent heads to the luxurious manor deep in the forest. At the gate, he asks the guard if Isaac is inside, and the guard lets him pass without any trouble, though he warns him to be careful even though he's been invited for a job. The guard explains that the maze was created with a magical artifact that constantly shifts the walls, which really impresses Rent. The guard goes on to reveal that it's just one of many such artifacts the Latour family has collected. He adds that anyone who makes it through will be able to choose any magic item from their collection, and today happens to be one of the days the maze is open. After that, the guard drops a little hint that the sun won't help him, and with that, Rent dives into the maze right away, thinking to himself that it'd be amazing if he could get his hands on a rare magic item. After covering some distance, he checks his magic map, but it shows nothing, probably because the labyrinth itself is created by a magical item. He continues through the orchard and soon realizes he's completely lost. Our lost guy comes across a resting spot where he notices a lady who invites him to join her for tea, saying the maze is set to keep going for quite some time. Rent quickly agrees and accepts her offer. The lady appears to be the daughter of the Latour family and uses a magical teapot to brew tea without needing any leaves, since the item lets her recreate the flavor of any tea it has ever brewed before. She drops the bombshell that this teapot, discovered in a labyrinth, sold for over 100 platinum, and Rent knows that a single platinum here can keep a person living in luxury for their entire life, making it clear just how wealthy the family really is. When Rent breaks off a part of his mask to drink the tea, the girl immediately recognizes it as a magic item and insists on buying it since the Latour family is known for collecting magical items. When she offers to pay a fortune for it, Rent feels tempted to sell, but he can't remove it anyway, and it has saved his life by hiding the fact that he is some ugly undead. Just as he's about to leave, the lady gives him yet another clue, and this one too is about the sun, insisting he's better off without looking directly at it. Rent finds this incredibly confusing, but stares at the sun anyway and quickly raises a stone, realizing there is some teleportation spell at work here. He gets teleported back to the very start and tries again, repeating the process over and over until the sun is about to set, and then finally he makes it to the exit. After clearing that stupid maze, he gets congratulated by the same lady from before, who introduces herself as Laura Latour and tells him she's the head of the family. When Rent asks about the reward, the lady leads him to a place full of treasures, letting him choose one for himself. She walks him through a few magical items on display, and during their little tour, Rent accidentally triggers a golem. The guard quickly informs him that it was his mana that activated the thing. The massive creature starts tailing him, throwing attacks that put Rent through one hell of a workout. As the hits keep coming, Rent tries to remember what Lorraine once told him about golems, that they usually have a word carved in a magical language on their foreheads, and if he could somehow alter it by adding just one character to turn it into the word for death, the golem would immediately shut down. He prepares to use his secret weapon, the axe, up his sleeve, hoping to land the right hit in time, but luckily for him, the guard manages to shut the golem down before Rent has to do anything drastic. While still catching his breath, Rent's eyes land on the blade and then spot a strange vial filled with something that looks suspiciously like blood. The woman casually explains that it is actually vampire blood and goes on to tell him about the rumors that drinking the blood of a vampire is said to turn someone into one. Although every person who has ever tried either went insane or met some horrible fate. She suggests that instead of taking that risk, he could just sell it to some high-ranking noble, since something like this would easily go for a huge price. Rent seems tempted by the idea and decides to hold on to it. He eventually returns to Lorraine's place, now also carrying a magical aircraft toy that his inner child absolutely could not resist. While he had originally chosen only the vial as he was about to leave, the butler came up to him and handed him the aircraft as a token of appreciation for taking care of such a difficult task for them. Back at the lady's mansion, the butler fills a cup with a few drops of blood and respectfully offers it to Laura. Meanwhile, Rent shows off the vial to Lorraine, insisting that the instant his eyes landed on it, he felt certain that drinking it would trigger some kind of change within him. Even though she warns him that he might not survive, Rent stays firm on his decision and says he still wants to take the risk and drink it anyway. Lorraine admits she would like it if he doesn't drink it, since he seems to be doing just fine in his new body, and she would be happy if he spends his life adventuring and living with her forever, though she knows that's not what he truly wants. Rent grunts and stares at the vial of blood again, then proudly declares that he's dreamed of becoming mythical class since he was a kid. That reminds her of something she was talking about with Sheila, and she tells him not to worry about it, which only makes him more curious. He sweet-talks her into sharing what she knows, and she says he doesn't have to answer if he's not comfortable, though he thinks she already knows nearly everything about him. She finally asks the big question about what drives him to reach mithril rank. He's surprised and asks if he really hasn't told her yet, which makes her facepalm pretty hard at Rent being Rent. Still, she says there's an unspoken rule about never asking adventurers about their past, and she knows he does not have some crazy dark backstory, so she never thought much about it. Sitting on the couch, Rent admits he never found the right time to bring it up and says it started out as revenge, but now it's more about getting strong enough to make sure tragedy never strikes again. Rent's memory flashes back to his village far from the city, where his father used to travel to buy supplies, and one time he let Rent join him for the carriage ride. There, Rent chats with his friend Jinlin, who's super hyped about how cool the city is, though he looks a bit uneasy about the dangers of bandits or monsters. She calls him a spineless little wimp and quietly whispers he's never going to become an adventurer with that kind of mindset. While staring out the window, Jinlin keeps going on about all the wild stories she's heard, and Rent keeps up his usual musty wet blanket energy, so she grins and tells him not to worry since she'll be the one to protect him from his demons. Thinking back to those good times, Rent says it was all fun until his tone shifts as he starts talking about the journey back. They were attacked by a monster and their carriage broke apart, crushing his granny beneath it, while his parents lay on the ground completely lifeless. Rent stands there completely frozen as the wild beast closes in, so Jinlin grabs him without hesitation and bolts. As they sprint through the forest, they eventually reach an open field and think they've escaped. But then a small pebble rolls down from a hill where the monster stares them down like a predator toying with its prey. It shoots them a side-eye to assert dominance, that they're nothing but its playthings. Just as it lunges to finish the job, Rent's last clear memory is Jinlin smiling right before she gets one shot as she pushes him out of the way. The crybaby crawls over to her and asks why she did it, to which she softly reminds him of her promise to protect him and asks him to promise he'll grow stronger for her. Right before the beast strikes again, a white-haired knight appears and blocks the attack and forces the creature to retreat. Rent watches in awe as the man farms aura points and goes head-to-head with a monster using a massive sword. Even after getting knocked back by one of his brutal attacks, he dives back in and jams his thick, heavy blade between its jaws to throw it off, and then follows up with a Hulk smash that leaves behind a giant crater. He taunts the doggy and asks if it still wants a piece of him, but the creature backs off and runs for its life. After that, he checks on the kids, and Rent, still in tears, asks why he didn't come just a little sooner. The man apologizes for arriving late and tries to comfort him by saying he didn't do anything wrong. Rent continues that the man took him back to his village where he started practicing with his sword every single day. One day, he asks this hero how he can become an adventurer, and the man asks why he's so interested. Rent explains that his friend always dreamed of being one, and now he wants to make her wish come true. The man tells him he can't become an adventurer until he's at least 15, which makes Rent really sad, but the man encourages him to keep training with his sword and learn everything he can about adventuring and monsters until then. That sparks something in Rent, and he asks if doing all that will make him strong. The man gives him a solid reality check and says intelligence and talent can only take him so far, so he better grind as hard as possible. Then the man finally introduces himself as Wilfried Rieker, a mithril rank adventurer. With that, he pats Rent on the head and tells him to chase his dreams and stay alive till he has no regrets. Back in the present, Rent says that was the day he swore to hunt down the beast that took Jinlin and his parents, and one day become a mithril rank Gigachad like Wilfried. He admits he's terrified, but that's not going to stop him, and Lorraine already knows he was planning to drink the vial from the start. She promises she'll be gentle with his body if he doesn't make it. He tells her to burn him to ash if he is beyond helping, while she hopes it doesn't come to that. With that, his mask fades away and he shoves the bad boy in one go. Lorraine calls out his name, but he insists he's doing fine, making her think the blood was fake. Suddenly, he starts choking and drops to his knees, screaming in agony. Lorraine steadies herself and shuts her eyes as his painful cries echo through the room. The disgusting sensation of turning into a monster fuels his rage, but the transformation keeps pushing forward. That's when he hears Lorraine's voice reminding him that he has a goal to reach, so he better come back to her. Her words help him hold on to his sanity just before everything fades to white. A short while later, he opens his eyes in the same open sky as Ken Kaneki and feels strangely at peace, happy that he's finally felt sleepy for the first time in forever. Thinking back on everything he's gone through, he figures he only made it this far because he's no longer human. Later on, he slowly blinks awake again and sees Lorraine sitting beside him. She casually mentions she's been reading up on vampires, which throws him off, so she snaps him out of his daze by congratulating him on becoming one. He asks what kind of vampire he is, so she tells Rent to strip for her like a good boy. After he takes his clothes off, she checks out his chiseled, jacked build and also notices he's got wings that he can shrink on command, making him glad he won't look like some cringe cosplayer out in public. Even so, Lorraine admits she's not sure exactly what kind of vampire he is, but she's confident he's a special type because normal vampires don't come with wings. He then takes off his mask and flashes his sharp white fangs, confirming he is a vampire, and finally pulls down the top half to reveal glowing crimson eyes. Seeing his familiar face, Lorraine smiles, gently places her hand on his cheek, and gives him a warm welcome back. And that's how Season 1 of Unwanted Undead Adventurer comes to an end.